December and Christmas will be here before you know it, and along with that, all the festivities, including the Mom's Christmas celebration. Ladies, mark your calendars for Thursday, December 1st, as we usher in this most wonderful season. We have lined up a great speaker, yummy dessert, and of course, our famous silent auction. You won't want to miss it. Tickets will be $12 in advance or $15 at the door and will go on sale in the next couple of weeks, so watch the information card for more details. And Merry Christmas.
Cross Connect is a coffee house for women of all walks of life to connect, share, and find community. Join us tonight from 6:30 to 8:30 p.m. here in Lakeview Theatre. See you tonight.
Lakeview Church is looking for a worship arts assistant. And maybe the best part of this whole job is that you actually get to share an office with me. So, I don't know, maybe we could hang out and just talk, or maybe we could be friends. And if you're still interested, email us at resumes@lakeviewchurch.com and we'll send you the full job description.
Indoor playground continues every Thursday from 9:30 to 11:30 a.m. in the gym until December 22nd. This is a free casual drop-in session where you can let your kids burn off some energy. Also, starting January 5th, during Indoor Playground at 10 a.m., we'll be adding a free exercise class. I'll be leading some Pilates-inspired movement that incorporates strength, core, and stretching. It's post-baby friendly and all abilities are welcome. So bring your exercise mat and we'll exercise away those January blues while our kids play.
Christmas dinner is coming early. It's going to be here in the church lobby on Thursday, December the 8th at 12:30. So, if you're over 55, you're welcome to join us here for turkey and all the trimmings. It's just $10 at the door, so you could probably bring a friend along. And we're also collecting mitts and socks for the Bridge Ministry on 20th Street, so bring along a pair of those if you can. You'll need to sign up at the newsstand or call the church office before Tuesday, December the 6th. Don't be late. We need to know how many turkeys to roast.
So those are your announcements. For more information, head to the homepage of lakeviewchurch.com.
So if you have been tracking with us for the last 4 weeks, you know that we have been in the book, The Story of Ruth. And the challenge that we've thrown out to you week after week is this: find yourself in this story. Because the story of Ruth isn't a story about some little girl thousands of years ago. Her story is actually our story. That when you unpack all the characters and all the happenings, the things that she has experienced and lived through are things that we have experienced and lived through as well. But in addition to that, in those reflections, we've also caught traces of God. We've discovered through this story that our God is a God who speaks, who continues to speak, and more often than not, he speaks through people like you and I. We've learned that God is a God who provides not only in the good times, but also in times of famine. So even if you're bottoming out, even if life is crashing its doors onto you, God's sustenance, his peace, the way he looks after us is steady and it continues. And like Kurt talked about last week, our God is a God who keeps his promises all the time. So if we hang on to those things that we've learned, if, again, we continue to think about where we find ourselves in the story, I want to pull that all together as we go into the last chapter of Ruth. And this morning I want to talk about 3 things. We're going to talk a little bit about romantic comedies, which some of you I know will like. We're going to talk a little bit about acquisitions and mergers. And because we're heading into the holiday season, we're going to talk a little bit about how to manage your insane family. So all of that and more, Ruth chapter 4. Rolls like this: that Boaz went straight to the public square and took his place there. And before long, the closer relative, the one who mentioned earlier by Boaz, strolled by. "Step aside, old friend," said Boaz. "Take a seat." And the man sat down. Boaz then gathered 10 of the town elders together and said, "Sit down here with us. We've got some business to take care of." And they sat down. And Boaz then said to his relative, "The piece of property that belongs to our relative Elimelech is being sold by his widow Naomi, who has just returned from the country of Moab. And I thought you ought to know about it. Buy it back if you want. You can make it official in the presence of those sitting here and before the town elders. You have first redeemer rights. If you don't want it, tell me so. I'll know where I stand. You're first in line to do this, and I'm next after you." And he said, "Well, I'll buy it." And though Boaz added, whoops. Boaz added, you realize, don't you, that when you buy the field from Naomi, you also get Ruth the Moabite, the widow of our dead relative, along with the Redeemer responsibility to have children with her to carry on the family line. And then the relative said, oh, yeah, I can't do that. I would jeopardize my own family's inheritance. You go ahead and buy it. You can have my rights. I can't do it. In the olden times in Israel, this is how they handled official business regarding matters of property and inheritance. A man would take off his shoe and give it to the other person. This was the same as an official seal or personal signature in Israel. So when Boaz's Redeemer relative said, go ahead and buy it, he signed the deal by pulling off his shoe like we all do, just passing off footwear every time you sign up for a line of credit or a mortgage. There's lots going on here. So in these opening verses of the last chapter of the story of Ruth, the location is the first thing that is a signal to us that something is going to happen. Your Bible might say that this takes place at the city gate. This version said in the town square. This is a special kind of a spot. It's a plaza. There's no rooftop covering. This is the kind of spot, the spot, where you would come together and you would make decisions. This is where stuff was decided and things happened. And archaeologists have uncovered gates like this, and they say that more often than not, there are these stone benches that all are pointing, facing inward, because it's the kind of place where people would gather so you could do the business that you had to do. So part of it's symbolic and part of it's practical, but this gateway is this interface between your house life and your life outside of your house. It's the overlap, it's the interface. It's where your private and your public life wrap onto each other. So then, the storyteller says that on that specific place, in that special turf, that's when the exact guy that Boaz needs to talk to shows up at the exact right time. So this, if you've picked it up throughout this whole story, is another wink, wink, and nudge, nudge from the narrator. He's telling us that something is going on here. If the story of Ruth were to be made in a major motion picture today, it would actually be a romantic comedy starring Jennifer Aniston, Sandra Bullock, or J-Lo, or one of those girls. Do those girls still act? Have I just dated myself terribly? Does that still happen? Everyone ever been to a romantic comedy before? Anyone ever had someone force you to go to a romantic and then you want your $12 back at the end of the hour? Yeah, it's just me? No, there's some people clapping. You get it, right? But when you watch those kinds of movies, you're like, oh my gosh, this is so obvious. The girl's going to get the boy's going to get the girl. They're going to live happily ever after. Hilarity will ensue in the middle. This is the story of Ruth. And you and I, as the audience, we're watching this unfold. And we know that God is up to something. So, in the right place, in the right time, the right guy shows up. And this Bible says, he's just an unnamed relative. Your Bible might say, so-and-so. I love it. So-and-so showed up. This guy's obviously not important enough to have his name mentioned, but he's not a bad guy. He's not a villain. He's part of the story, but he's not the point. He's a bit of a prop, because the real point, the real focus here is on what God is up to in and through Boaz. That's the most important of all the details. So when Boaz explains things out to Mr. So-and-so right away, he says yes. And then when Boaz reminds him that part of that yes also includes picking up Naomi and Ruth, he quickly backs down. He says, I can't do it. Why? Because it's going to take too much of a bite out of my net worth. And that actually reminded me of a story from a few years ago. Maybe you read it. It goes like this. The woman who weaved together the magical world of Harry Potter, netting her an estimated $1.6 million every day, is no longer a part of the Billionaires Club. Forbes magazine, which last year recognized J.K. Rowling as the world's first female billionaire novelist, released an updated version of its world's billionaire list last week, with the 46-year-old notably absent. It's not that the world is no longer in love with all things Harry Potter. The brand itself is estimated to be worth more than $15 billion, but rather Rowling's charitable giving and taxes that have knocked her back down to the Millionaires Club. New information about Rowling's estimated $160 million in charitable giving, combined with Britain's high tax rates, bumped the Harry Potter scribe from our list this year, stated Forbes. Naturally, none of this likely bothers Rowling, who from the beginning has made giving back a priority for her wealth. You have a moral responsibility when you've been given far more than you need to do wise things with it and give intelligently, she said. So there is something about J.K. Rowling's action here that tie into the story of Ruth and ultimately tie into the story of God. When we think about Mr. So-and-so, he's done the math in his head, and he knows it doesn't work because he's got to pick up the land. There's debt on the land, fair enough, and then he acquires, quote unquote, these two women, which aren't that much of an expense, but there's something else going on here. Because part of his role and responsibility as the next of kin is to father a child through his deceased relative's line by way of Ruth. And here's the trouble with that. He's got to buy the land. He's got to pay off the debt. He's got to look after these ladies. He has to rear this child. And once that is all done and this boy comes of age, well, he gets all of it. It all belongs to him. It's part of his inheritance. So Mr. So-and-so can pour all this time, money, resources, sweat equity in, but at the end of the day, it's not going to belong to him. It's going to knock him off the Forbes list. But Boaz does the opposite. He actually assumes the risk because, like Rowling, he can see the bigger picture, or more accurately, he can better see the beginning point. Because you got to remember, Hebrews here are always going off who God has made them to be and called them to be. And they know that right from the very beginning, God says, this land that you have is a gift to you. It doesn't belong to you. It belongs to me, but I'm letting you look after it for now. We become its stewards. We hold it in trust. And there were rules as to who got land and how it was parceled out. And then when it was transferred over from person to person, there was rules looking after that, making sure it was all taken care of. But here's what was absent from those dealings. From people who said things like, this is mine. This is all mine. It belongs to me, and I can do whatever I want with it. That wasn't the attitude. The attitude was more like this. All of this belongs to God, and I am responsible to look after part of it. So what we see in J.K. Rowling is what we see in Boaz. That there's no hanging on to what is rightfully theirs. Instead, what we see here is an assuming of responsibility, even if in the process they are subjected to some sort of loss. There's some big ideas here. Let's unpack that a bit further. A few quotes to help us think it through. Try this one on for size here. That we are called to invest what is God's in the work of God's kingdom. God did not call us to have dominion over the earth. God called us to be trustees of God's estate. Okay, that makes sense. I get it. But some of you are saying, you know what? Make it more practical, Joel. What are the nuts and bolts? What do I actually have to do? Well, then try this on for size. If I have it and somebody else needs it, it's theirs. Okay, well, that I get. That I can sink my teeth into. But some of you are more philosophically minded, and you're like, give me the meta-narrative, give me the big picture here. I want to sit with something and chew on it. Well, chew on this then. That the opposite of poverty is not property. The opposite of both is community. So hang on to these in tension here. These explanations begin to round out for us here what we're seeing in Boaz, and starting to put some meat on the bones of how we are able to see ourselves in God's world. Because there is a calling for those of us who identify as disciples of Jesus to merge our lives with the lives of others. Because we understand that pain and poverty can only be relieved, can only be healed by way of friendship, relationship, and community. Because there is a calling on the lives of those of us who identify ourselves as disciples of Jesus to acquire the wins and the losses of the people that we have tied ourselves to. So when you're in with your group, man, you celebrate those wins. You love them. You look after them. You throw huge parties. When someone does well, you honor it. It's great. You're with those people present. But when those same people bottom out and things crash and things aren't so good, well, you're there too. You're present. You're committed through thick and thin. So what we're beginning to uncover here in this story is that God's kingdom is really more about investments than it is about payoffs. So with that in mind, some tough questions rise out of the text here this morning. Maybe one of them is going to hit you between the eyes. Try this one on for size. Have you recently been ever in one of those moments where you're in the right place at the right time, where the right person shows up, and you know that God is asking you, calling you, pointing you to do something? I know those feelings. I feel like those feelings get sharper and sharper. And I don't want to get spooky on you here this morning, but sometimes I can see them coming a mile away. And when they actually hit, I'm like, seriously, God? You want me to talk to this guy? Okay, fine. But I've trained myself. So maybe that's the next question for you. Have you trained yourself? Are you aware of those moments? Are you going into your days and saying, God, if the right moment, the right place, the right time, with the right person comes out, will you give me the right word, the right thing to say, the right thing to do? What do you want me to do? What have you entrusted to me in that moment? Well, if that's not for you, if you got that one down, what about this? Have you ever taken a good look at the things that God has gifted to you? Do you know the things that you are holding in trust on God's behalf? And if you've made that list, if you've looked after it, perhaps the next question for you is this: where do you need to invest those gifts? Where do you need to assume responsibility? Where do you need to merge and acquire your life with somebody else's? Now let all those things sit for a little bit. Let them simmer, because the story goes on and there's more to say about those things. Here we go. The Boaz then addressed the elders and all the people in the town square that day. You are witnesses today that I have bought from Naomi everything that belonged to Elimelech and Kilion and Mahlon, including responsibility for Ruth the foreigner, the widow of Mahlon. I'll take her as my wife and keep the name of the deceased alive along with his inheritance. The memory and reputation of the deceased is not going to disappear out of this family or from his hometown. To all this you are witnesses this very day. And all the people in the town square that day, backing up the elders, said, yes, we are witnesses. May God make this woman who is coming into your household like Rachel and Leah, the two women who built the family of Israel. May God make you a pillar, an Ephratah, famous in Bethlehem. With the children God gives you from this young woman, may your family rival the family of Perez, the son of Tamar, bore to Judah. You know what we see here in this passage? We see permission. Permission to forge new kinds of families. Permission to say that, yeah, you know what? Families can come together by ways that aren't the normal means. It doesn't have to be neat and tidy and clean all the time. This is permission for us to redefine what a family can be. You know what else we see here? We see inclusion. That Ruth has received the ultimate upgrade. She's gone from outsider refugee to be redeemed, reestablished, and accepted. And then these words are spoken over, and they said, you're going to be like Rachel and Leah. What? The matriarchs of the family of Israel? Wow. So you might be thinking, well, why are all these things happening to Ruth? It's because her story's not over yet, obviously. It continues. Boaz married Ruth. She became his wife. Boaz slept with her. And by God's gracious gift, she conceived and had a son. And the town women said to Naomi, blessed be God. He didn't leave you without family to carry on your life. May this baby grow up to be famous in Israel. He'll make you young again. He'll take care of you in your old age. And this daughter-in-law who has brought him into the world then loves you so much. Why? She's worth more to you than 7 sons. And Naomi took the baby and held him in her arms, cuddling him, cooing over him, waiting on him hand and foot. And the neighborhood women started calling him Naomi's baby boy. But his real name was Obed. And Obed was the father of Jesse. And Jesse was the father of David. And this is the family tree of Perez. Time out here. I usually skip these genealogies because they're super boring and I don't know what they mean. But today we're going to find out. So we're going to read a lot of them. Here it goes. This is the family tree of Perez. Perez had Hezron. Hezron had Ram. Ram had Abinadab. Abinadab had Nahshon. Nahshon had Salmon, who might be a fishy character. Salmon had Boaz. Boaz had Obed. Obed had Jesse. And Jesse had David. So what we have here is a telescopic view of this family line that Ruth is a part of. And obviously, this story of Ruth has been recorded. Hundreds of years have passed since it actually happened, because we got a handful of generations here that have come afterwards. But what we see here is the unfolding of Ruth's story and the part she has to play in what becomes this kingly line of David. So this story, this lineup feels grandiose, it feels regal. But what if we flipped that around and took a microscopic view of the people who are on this list? Will we still have those same feelings? Will we still look at this list and say, wow, look at all these amazing people, and look how it all led to King David? I don't know if we would. Let's start at the top and just grab a couple of names. The first guy's name there is Perez. You know who Perez is? Probably not. Perez is the son of Tamar and Judah. Do you know what happened in that story? Oh, guys, this is kind of gross. So Tamar is married to this guy who dies. She has no baby. The brother is supposed to step in, continue that line. He says he doesn't want to. You should read that story. It's kind of funny, actually. Kids, you shouldn't read it. But adults, you should read that story. So then Tamar takes matters into her own hands. She wants to have a child. So she somehow, one thing leads to another. She sleeps with Judah, and she has a baby. But here's the problem. Judah is her father-in-law. Oh, gosh. Oh, my goodness. That's weird. That's underhanded. Because at some point, this kid's going to grow up, and you're going to have to explain to him that his granddad is actually his dad. And that's never a good day when you have to have that conversation. That's super weird, right? Yet, this is the beginning. And remember how much heat the gross, nasty Moabites have gotten from Israel, when right in this family tree, there's the same kind of inbred trouble. It's true. Go down the line. Nashon. Who's Nashon? Nashon is Aaron's brother-in-law. Who's Aaron? Aaron is Moses' right-hand man. So what that tells us, that dude probably lived in the darkest period of Israel's story. Egyptian captivity, 40 years in the wilderness, the time of the judges. This wasn't all roses and lollipops and gumdrops. These were tough times. These were the dark years. So the question for you and I is this. Why then does the author, why does the narrator drop all these names? Why is he giving us this lineup? Why is this important to the story? I'm wondering if it adds up to something. Maybe it's a message to you and I that when your family is messed up, maybe you take it day by day, because there's this long game plan that God is up to something. Maybe it's a sign to you and I that all we've ever had to work with are the broken, messy pieces, and that nothing is going to be perfect the way we want it to be perfect. Maybe it's a sign to us that God is always going to get God's way, no matter how badly humans meddle with his plans. Why? Because he is a God who pulls under his wings all the screw-ups, all the underachievers, and all those who have no business being included. That's what seems like is going on here. But when we think about that, this is also the juncture where people like you and I can go off the rails. Because we can take that microscope that we look at these people's lives, and we can flip it around and point it on ourselves, and we take a look at all of our brokenness. And instead of saying things like, oh, God is so amazing, look at God's love, grace, and mercy and power that he can even use and work through the king of failures like me. No, when we turn that microscope back on ourselves, usually what we go to is, I don't like me. I hate me. Look at the pile of bodies in my wake. Look at all I've destroyed. Look at all that I have broken. I'm not good enough. And then we just exclude ourselves from what God is up to. Let me give you a newsflash here. You aren't good enough. And you'll never be good enough. But you know what? It doesn't matter. You know why? Because Jesus said so. You and me, we are beloved, we are redeemed because of who Jesus is and because of what Jesus has done. So maybe you are that person who can see the long telescopic view, see the grand arch, that grand story, and say, yeah, God is up to something. Or if you reject that, maybe you're the person who looks at the microscope and you see people, and you look back at yourself, and you might reject that. If you don't play by telescopes or microscopes, maybe you're rolling your life with, with horoscopes. You see what I did there? I took those three words, they got the same ending. They're all, you got that? You didn't get that? Look, I wrote it right there on the left-hand side there. Microscope, telescope. Yeah, right there. You like that? Thanks so much. Yeah, that right there. Because if you're that type of person, then you're the type of person that says, well, life is life. Whatever happens, happens. God is in control. I'm at the mercy of whatever comes my way. I'm at the mercy of whatever star I was born under, instead of at the mercy of the one who actually holds the stars. Because here's the thing, folks. No matter where your life is at today, your story is not over. It's not finished. And may we take some encouragement this morning from this lineup that we see in Ruth that, you know what? Why don't we just hop over to Matthew a little bit? Because the book of Matthew sort of expands on this lineup. We got some more names here. It's going to be good stuff. Check it out. That Abraham, he's the father of Isaac. Isaac the father of Jacob. Jacob the father of Judah and his brothers. Judah the father of Perez and Jerah, whose mother was Tamar, right? We know what happened there now, right? So Perez the father of Hezron. Hezron the father of Ram. Ram the father of Amminadab. Amminadab the father of Nahshon. Bad, dark years for that guy. Nahshon the father of Salmon, fishy character. Salmon the father of Boaz, whose mother was Rahab. Boaz the father of Obed, whose mother was Ruth. Obed the father of Jesse, and Jesse the father of King David. And David was the father of Solomon, whose mother had been Uriah's wife. Are you tracking this lineup of misfits? Start with Jacob. He's the supplanter, the schemer. He's a shady shyster of a character. And he's in this grand lineup? And now we have Rahab. First of all, to actually even have women in a genealogical lineup like this is already earth-shattering for this culture. But then to throw in someone like Rahab, who's a prostitute, she's in this lineup. And then when we track down towards the bottom there, we say Solomon, his dad's David, and his mother is Uriah's wife. What? You remember that story, right? That David sees Bathsheba, she's taking a bath on a roof. Why are you taking a bath on a roof? I do not know. He says he wants her, sends her husband to the front line of battle and effectively kills him, murders him so that he can take his wife. This is the guy, this is the one, David, a man after God's own heart. This guy? And then you got Solomon, who's supposed to be the smartest man ever. And what he does is open the floodgates of false gods all over the people of Israel. Friends, when we read a lineup of names like this, we need to recognize that attached to each name is a story. So trace the lines. Track what God is doing through their pain and dysfunction. And if you can manage it, track what God is doing through your own pain and through your own dysfunction. Because if God can use Jacob and Perez and Judah and Tamar, if God can look after Boaz and Rahab, if God can work through David and Solomon and Ruth, why couldn't he work through you? Sometimes we look at this biblical lineup and we say, oh, what a cast of all-stars. But this is actually a cast of misfits and losers and screw-ups. And it's not over yet. Just a few more names. Solomon was the father of Rehoboam. Rehoboam the father of Abijah. Abijah the father of Asa. Asa the father of Jehoshaphat. Jehoshaphat the father of Jehoram. Jehoram the father of Uzziah. Uzziah the father of Jotham. Jotham the father of Ahaz. Ahaz the father of Hezekiah. Hezekiah the father of Manasseh. Manasseh the father of Amon. Amon the father of Josiah. And Josiah the father of Jeconiah and his brothers at the time of exile in Babylon. Lots of time is passing. Exile, Babylon, not good years. More names, more stories. Here we go. Last lineup. And after the exile to Babylon, Jeconiah was the father of Shealtiel. Shealtiel the father of Zerubbabel. Zerubbabel the father of Abihud. Abihud the father of Eliakim. Eliakim the father of Azor. Azor the father of Zadok. Zadok the father of Akim. Akim the father of Elihud. Elihud the father of Eleazar. Eleazar the father of Mathan. Mathan the father of Jacob. And Jacob the father of Joseph, the husband of Mary. And Mary was the mother of Jesus, who is called the Messiah. Friends, the big takeaway for us from the story of Ruth is this, is that our faith isn't about defending anything. Instead, our faith is about proclaiming something, proclaiming someone. To be defensive is to be protective because you're worried about it getting dirty or getting in or not being perfect and clean. Too late. It's already not perfect and clean. But to proclaim is to be resilient. Is to say that no matter what happens, we remember that for now, you and I are between beginnings. That very, very first beginning, way at the start, where God says, look after stuff, and that very next beginning, the new beginning, where God's going to set all wrongs to rights and renew all things. It's also a reminder for us that it's good news. That the good news of Jesus is that he is tying all of our stories together into his happy ending. And how's that for an introduction to the Advent season?